Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Ebi Weyime, and today we have a very interesting discussion, and it's about poverty and how it affects you as a child. Or rather, the question is, does poverty affect you as a child getting into adulthood? And if so, how? Let's listen in.
So you know how when we talk about abuse that your parents inflicted, we talk about how parents will put bills in their kids' names and mess up their credit, all of that stuff, right? I remember when I would get money from family members, like I would visit a family, they would throw me $20, $5, whatever. My parents will always ask to hold it for me. Let me hold it for you. Me thinking that they were just literally storing it for me because I'm 9 or 10. I don't have a piggy bank at the time. I don't have a savings account. They're holding it for me. Meanwhile, they're going and they spending it. I don't know what they spending it on. And they could say they were spending it on me, but you betrayed my trust by taking my money. I remember one time, I think I had accumulated in my mind like about $80. I was like 10 or 11. And I go to my mom, I'm like, can I have it? And she just looked at me like I was wrong for asking for it. It was my money. Anyway.
Tuko na simu hizi aina Infinix Note 20i, yani simu ambayo inakuja na storage ambayo ni 256 plus 7 GB storage. Simu kubwa sana inakuja na 50 megapixel ultra.
This is how poverty destroyed my mental health. And I normally don't like to share personal information on here, but for the sake of this topic, I will. For context, I grew up in a poor family. Both my parents were extremely abusive and neglectful, and they also did not financially support me once I became an adult. Because my stepdad didn't care and my mom was never there, I never learned proper hygiene habits from my parents. No child is born knowing how to take care of themselves and take care of their living space. These are things that your parents have to teach you. And since my parents didn't teach me, I developed some very bad hygiene habits that I carried from childhood into adulthood. And everything that I learned about hygiene and self-care, I learned from other adults as an adult. And you can imagine just how humiliating that actually is. I was also ridiculed by my peers as a child and as an adult for wearing cheap, plain, tacky, sort of poorly made clothes because as a poor person, that's all I could afford to wear. And even my friends who claimed to love and support me would still ridicule me for my appearance, knowing good and damn well that I was very, very poor and that my mental health was terrible. Being poor also excluded me from a lot of things as a child and as an adult, and I often would sit by myself at home because I was too poor to go out with my friends and have fun, and that contributed to a lot of feelings of depression, anxiety, and just utter worthlessness. I also fell into drug addiction because as a poor person, I didn't have access to mental health professionals, and so I used drugs to self-medicate my symptoms, and I was often very sick from that. I also suffered from IBS because I wasn't able to afford good food to feed myself, and so I was constantly sick and nauseous and bloated from eating the cheap food that I could afford. I also ended up in the hospital for attempting to take my own life, and a lot of the stress factors in my life when I were due to financial difficulties and worrying about how I'm going to pay my bills and how I'm going to feed myself, and constantly feeling like I was stuck in the cycle of poverty that I couldn't get out of, and that's why I didn't want to live anymore. So the next time you make fun of someone for having bad self-care or not being polished and put together and not living an extravagant lifestyle and not keeping up with everything that other people around them are doing, think about the ways that poverty can really affect someone, from the way that they carry themselves to the way that they live their lives to the things that they do. Poverty is a destroyer, and it destroyed me.
One of the worst things for our mental health Hi, I'm Professor Ahmed Hankir. I'm a consultant psychiatrist, and my job is to assess and treat mental health conditions. So, one of the worst things, if not the worst thing for our mental health, is poverty. Poverty negatively affects our lives and mental health in many ways. And I'll give you one example: accommodation. People living in poverty often have difficulty paying for rent. Home insecurity and homelessness are major issues in society that adversely affect our mental health. Moreover, the type of accommodation that a person lives in heavily influences their mental health. Many of us struggling to make ends meet, often we can only afford to live in a place that is dilapidated and squalid. Moreover, the area that the accommodation is situated in heavily influences our mental health. So if you are wealthy, you can afford to live in an affluent area like Wimbledon and southwest London in the UK, for example, and there are safer neighborhoods and there are lower crime rates. However, if you are struggling to make ends meet, likely you will live in an area that is deprived and there are higher crime rates and it's unsafe and more insecure. So that is just one example of how poverty can adversely affect our mental health. So the government needs to allocate more resources to social care, especially the most vulnerable amongst us, people living with severe mental illness, because it is not uncommon for a person living with a severe mental illness to have no fixed abode. So as I said, homelessness is a major issue in society. Okay, as always, protect your minds and protect your hearts, and bye for now.
So, what do you think? Do you think that poverty negatively affects your mental health, or do you have a different opinion? Please leave your opinions in the comment section, and as usual, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you next week. Remember to subscribe. Goodbye.